Pokemon Pinball was released in 1999 in Japan for the Game Boy Color. As is obvious from the name, it's a pinball game in which the table consists entirely of Pokemon-related bits and bobs to score points on using a Pokeball-shaped pinball. It also features the ability to catch and evolve Pokemon along the way, in order to fill a Pokédex much like in the original Pokemon games. Now, I must note, although it was indeed a Game Boy Color game, the footage you are seeing is taken from a Super Game Boy on the Super Nintendo, which plays it in monochrome, so you'll have to forgive me for that. Despite the lack of color on the Super Game Boy, believe me when I say the graphics of Pokemon Pinball were great for the time. Even the title screen is a joy to look at. Having been released only a year after Pokemon Red and Blue, Pokemon Pinball slightly tweaked the designs of the Pokemon, giving them a fresh look, although they were comfortingly familiar. The moving sprites during the catch phase of the game were an extremely nice touch too, as if it was something that we hadn't seen yet in the original games. The designs of the levels also made sure to incorporate as many elements of the Pokemon world as possible, from the jiggly Pikachu bumper to the angry-looking Voltorb head. Although the game was nice to look at, it was the gameplay that always kept me going back for more. Now, depending on your pinball skill, this game was either pretty easy or real hard. I think my mom was a far better player than I was, but there you go. You have two levels to choose from, Red and Blue. Red is significantly harder than Blue. This is due to the different level design. I can't really explain it, but Red is a bit more jagged, which makes aiming your pinball all the more difficult. For example, it can take ages to get the ball into Bellsprout's gaping maw because of the angle of the curve. Blue, on the other hand, is much more friendly to the casual pinballer. It's much more symmetrical and everything seems to curve just right. I definitely recommend this level to the less advanced player. If you've ever played a classic game of pinball, you know that the goal of the game is to score as highly as possible. Pokemon Pinball retains this, even including its own high scoreboard for each level, but adds a slight twist. By catching and evolving Pokemon, you are able to score more as you unlock bonus stages. The type of Pokemon available for capture depends on what city you're in. That's right, you can even travel through the different towns and cities just like in the original games. To enter the catch phase, you need to activate the arrows on the right side of the screen before you are able to maneuver your pinball into the mouth of your respective Pokemon. In the blue level, this would be Cloyster. If you manage that, you then have to flip over the pieces of a picture by hitting a certain part of the table. After hitting it the right amount of times, the picture flips over and reveals the sprite of the Pokemon you're after. Only by hitting that Pokemon several times will you then capture it, resulting in the all too familiar jiggly Pokeball animation. Hooray! From here, you can continue to catch more Pokemon, advancing through the different bonus levels. You can also evolve your Pokemon or level them up if they're not the evolving type. The evolution phase is slightly different. This time, you must hit certain lit up areas of the table. By hitting the correct area, you reveal either an object or experience points depending on the Pokemon's evolution requirement. After collecting 3 of these objects, you can then aim for the big blinking hole at the top of the screen, which will then successfully evolve your Pokemon. Even after playing the game for so many years, I still don't think I've discovered everything there is to see, and I certainly haven't captured all of the Pokemon from my Pokédex. It's a ton of fun, and the challenge is just frustrating enough to keep you coming back for more each time. I think the lowest point of the game is in its soundtrack, but even that's not saying much because some of the music is excellent. The music in the Mewtwo stage, for example, is extremely nerve-wracking and definitely suits the mood of the stage. However, the normal stage music can get a bit repetitive at times. Fortunately, if you keep catching Pokemon and playing bonus levels, you are able to break the monotony of the music. Overall though, it's still a fun soundtrack which brings back memories of endless grinding and frustration, in a good way of course. Overall, Pokemon Pinball has definitely stood up to the test of time. It's still fun, and if you can get a hold of your own copy, complete with a AAA battery for the Rumble Pack, it's definitely worth the endless amount of hours you will inevitably sink into it. As far as Pokemon spin-offs go, it stands up there as one of the very best.